Welcome to the Data Leadership Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony J. Algebin. Data is everywhere in our businesses, and it takes leadership to make the most of it. We bring you the people, stories, and lessons to help you become a data leader. Today, we welcome William McKnight. William has advised many of the world's best-known organizations. His strategies form the information management plan for leading companies in various industries. He's a prolific author and a popular keynote speaker and trainer. William also leads McKnight Consulting Group, which has twice placed on the Inc. 5000 list. William, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Anthony.
So, like all first-time guests, I like to start. Why don't you just take us 2-3 minutes, give us your career story and how you ended up doing what you do today with McKnight Consulting Group and the speaking. And that's, we obviously got to know each other through some of the speaking circuits. We would be talking at the same events, but let's understand more of that background and kind of take it from there.
Well, let's see. In 2 or 3 minutes, I started my career at IBM out of college. So I was on the development side of data products. It was DB2. And I've just been in data ever since. And all forms of data. I was at Platinum Technology. Some may remember that high-flying company back in the day. And I got into the enterprise with Visa and was part of one of the first successful data warehouse programs there ever was back then. Got a hold of Bill Inman's book and made it work at Visa. Did the wrong thing. I applied the technology to the organization. But anyway, from Visa, I ended up at Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield as an IT vice president. From there, I launched into consulting, and that was about 20 some odd years ago.
Wow, yeah.
So I've been consulting for about 22 years and various forms. I mean, I've always run the practice. I've always run the company, except for 3 years when I had sold my first company and went to the acquirer for 3 years. And then I launched this McKnight Consulting Group. It's about 11, 12 years ago by now. And so it's been consulting for 22 years and consulting to enterprise clients, of course, but also a lot of analyst work as well. So consulting to our vendors.
And you've done a lot of keynotes and speaking engagements kind of across the board. When did you start getting into that? Has that always been something that you've done?
Well, that job I had at Platinum Technology, it was actually mostly as a trainer and consultant, but I did a lot of training, and they put me on the road. They sent me to enterprises when I didn't have a ton of experience at that point in my career, but they trusted in me to do it, saw some value in doing that apparently. And it worked out. And I just got used to public speaking, from that. I'm not naturally, an outgoing person that you might think of as a public speaker, but I'm just really passionate about teaching and sharing my knowledge and seeing other people grow, and I found that that's a great avenue for me to do that with. So I do training. I do, obviously today, it's a lot of webinars, but as you mentioned, keynote speaking and showing up at people's user groups and road shows and whatnot. And I stay pretty relevant in the space in terms of what's going on. I influence it a little bit, but I'm always curious and reading and learning. So I'm trying to stay ahead of things that way and translate that into, what I know, branch off of that and share it back.
Right. So and I think about, there's so many different kinds of consulting out there. And you talked a bit about who you work with and how at a high level you've been in a consulting space for a good long time. What is it that your organization is known for specifically? Like, are you data governance? Are you data, technology? What do you focus in on?
Yeah, I'd say it's data architecture, data platforms, and stringing it all together to make it work with data integration, data virtualization, data architecture, really, for a label. And that comprises a lot these days. So it's obviously your data warehouse technology, which is just blown up in the past, decade. Data lakes today, a lot of it is today building data lakes and the lakehouse concept, together with the data warehouse. it's also master data management. It's also graph databases that we do, and data integration, streaming data, and yes, data governance, as you mentioned, over the top. We do programs. I mean, we want to be sure that what we do takes hold in the enterprise and sticks around. It's not something that you're going to rip and replace anytime soon.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, it kind of all comes back to organizational change, right? Like we're doing data transformations, we're doing fundamental improvement in what businesses do with the data that they have. And you kind of cover the gamut. But I can relate to this because I come from that kind of data builder mentality, that platform builder mentality where data architecture, you mentioned, it covers a lot of ground. And I think more and more ground, it seems. I even spoke at a data architecture conference a couple of years ago. It's like I started by like, what are we even talking about here? Like, what is data architecture? Can you even put that in a box anymore? Because there's so many hooks into it. It really is the entirety of the data space, I think.
It is. I mean, I look at it like it's your platform selection and it's your workload selection to the platform, because you can't put all data everywhere. And today there's no one size fits all. There's no data warehouse in the sky that, well, just everything goes there and we go there for everything. That's not how enterprises work. They have all sorts of technologies today, and appropriately so, I might add. And it's just going to get a little bit more complicated here as we go into artificial intelligence and machine learning and try to, achieve things with those technologies. At the same time, we have so many different platform styles to choose from for our data that, artificial intelligence is going to have to reach out over many different sources in our organization to be successful. So we help try to keep it organized, even though the ship must go on, while you might be adding on to some sort of some disorganization that might have resulted as a necessity of, meeting business demands. It's just about moving forward.
Yeah. And maybe a place, because I definitely want to spend some time talking about the different kinds of data technologies that are involved in platforms and how things are getting more complex. But there's something that you mentioned that it's kind of stuck in my head since you mentioned it a minute ago, around the notion of like data warehousing and what I would call like the traditional kind of big data. I hate the term big data, but the traditional big data platform, relational data warehousing and modeling and that stuff. That, despite what we've been hearing for the last couple decades of, oh, NoSQL is going to take it over, or data lakes are going to take it over, or whatever, data warehouses, I take it, are still thriving in huge parts of many data platforms and organizations today. Did I hear you correctly on that?
You did. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I get brought into organizations to, build a data lake or build data governance or look at our data quality or build master data management. And as I snoop around and as they, expose me to the environment, I usually find that the data warehouses are suboptimal. And as a matter of fact, putting some money and energy and time into that might actually be more beneficial to the company as a whole, because the data warehouse is so important. It remains so important. Now, the data lake has emerged as a complementary artifact, I would say, to the data warehouse. It's for that data. A lot of the data in the lakes, appropriately, it's data that we haven't been capturing because it's too voluminous. We haven't been able to make sense of it. But now we have data scientists, we have artificial intelligence, we have reasons to capture that data. And it may or may not be appropriate for a data warehouse. So I acknowledge there's other things, but the data warehouse is right. It's like the sun that everything revolves around. It's so important.
Let me ask a question that will then kind of circle back. This is kind of an unfair question to start with, but I think it's a interesting one. Can an organization be successful with a data lake if they have tried and failed with a data warehouse?
Well, let's put it this way. I'll just share, some of the calls that I've gotten this year about, we want to build a data lake. Because they've heard about this data lake concept. And as they describe the data lake to me, and some have said, well, we failed with data warehousing or whatever. As they describe their need to me, and they're calling the solution a data lake, it sounds to me like a data warehouse. Oh, they need a place for their analytics, a place for their reporting, to build their key KPIs, to do their standard reports and bursts of reports that they need in the organization, and a place for ad hoc query and so on. And yeah, that's still the data warehouse. So terminology is kind of all over the place. So sometimes people are asking for a data lake, but they really need what we would traditionally say is a data warehouse. Now, they may be saying, oh, we want to put it in cloud storage. We don't want the relational format, for the data. We don't want to pay for that. Or, we've heard it's faster over here or cheaper over here or something. That may be true, but most enterprises have a huge need for that sweet spot of where the data warehouse really satisfies. And that's when it's not too much volume, not too much complexity, not too much, but its capabilities, the warehouse's capabilities keep expanding as well. And so as you add these other things, data lakes, for example, they add to the picture of what an organization needs.
Yeah, and I'll continue perpetuating the term I don't like around big data, in that, data warehouses compared to data lakes. So data warehouses compared to not data warehouses were the big data, right? But data warehouses compared to data lakes are kind of where I think of it as the density of value, is this notion of big data. And to me, a data warehouse has a greater density of value because it tends to be well suited to your operational workloads and to the things that you're going to need to run every month or every year, and want to have that kind of benchmarking and some rigor around, because it tends to reflect your core business operations, versus a data lake can be anything you want. Like, that's everything. And it's great for exploration and innovation and great for data scientists and all of that. But if you are doing that and not doing the core operational analytics and that stuff, you have done something wrong. Like, start there. There's good value in that data warehouse. Get that right, and then expand to some of the fancier, looser stuff that has lower density of value, I think.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there, density of value. I completely agree, because every byte, every character, every field means something in the data warehouse. You're going to use it. Most of my clients will use all that data in some way, shape, or form. But in the data lake, you could be more exploratory. It's less expensive per capita. You can throw data in there. Not, you don't want to do it willy-nilly, but you can put data in there that you may or may not need down the road. As a matter of fact, a lot of my clients are doing just that right now, and they're getting ready for artificial intelligence. And they know that idea needs a lot of data. It needs all your data, if you really want to do it well. So they are starting to capture that data, don't have an immediate need, but know that need is coming. On the other hand, data scientists, sometimes we don't know exactly everything that they're doing, we builders, of these data infrastructures. We don't know everything they're doing, and they could actually be using a lot of that data in the data lake. So it's all good, but horses for courses here.
Do you have any kind of, I don't know, general tips or how do you compare being successful with building a data warehouse and getting the adoption of what's in a data warehouse versus when you're building a data lake and trying to get adoption in a data lake? Are there different techniques? Or there different strategies? Maybe it's a question around, is there different governance around what goes in there to make them most useful to the communities that need to use those particular technologies? I'm just trying to say, like, do we build a data lake fundamentally differently than the data warehouse, or do we do it in a way that looks very similar to a data warehouse with a couple twists?
Well, in a sense, it's like a data warehouse, and the data warehouse is like an operational database in a sense, where you have data coming in, you have uses for that data, and it's managed in the hub, whatever that may be, and it gets distributed from there or not. But I think that, lake concept, because of the cost factor, because of what it's geared for, and it's important that you position these things appropriately within the enterprise and that you build on that position. And whether you're right or not is important, but whether you're consistent or not, that's really important, because that puts your users' minds at ease. That puts the company's mind at ease, that, that group over there, they know what they're doing. They're using this for that, and they're using that for this other thing, and they're doing it consistently. I can see that. I can grow with that. But when it's piecemeal and you're not consistent, and You have people on the team that are saying different things about different things and maybe pursuing something they heard and didn't vet with the group, and they're pursuing that with the user community. This happens. That's not good. That's not good. So yes, I want you to be consistent. And yes, I believe that the technology, and we've done many benchmarks. We've done more benchmarks than anybody on this subject of data warehouses and data lakes, data warehouses versus data lakes, and streaming data ingestion and data integration and all this sort of thing. But what we have found is that indeed the lake is great for an enterprise for that data that the data scientist needs, but may not touch a lot. It's also a great feeder ground for the data warehouse. So the data warehouse, you might carry over a subset of the data, we call it staging, a subset of the data from the lake, but everything goes through the lake. Now, we're remediating this architecture in a lot of cases where, of course, that wasn't done because the lake didn't exist when the warehouse existed. There was another form of staging. That's fine. It's always a work in progress, but you should be able to consistently put it up on the wall. Everybody agrees to it. Everybody knows where you're going. Have that down the road architecture that you're moving towards, and look for opportunities in the business need where you can move the architecture in the direction of your future architecture. Right.
Yeah, and I think about sometimes with the data lake as it's difficult sometimes because it lacks the rigor, or I mean, rigor is not the right word, but the modeling inherent in a data warehouse. You don't build a data warehouse without modeling of some sort. And there's kind of some protections in keeping some of that consistency you talk about in place, because it's hard to change a data warehouse model compared to, it's pretty easy to just dump whatever you want to into a data lake, which tends to cause that problem of, it's really hard to navigate. It's hard to understand where to go for certain things and then use them and do so consistently and at scale. Is there a good solution for this? Because I don't know that I've seen a data lake without real curation happening just evolve with enough structure for people to navigate it well.
Well, it's a more curated audience, you might say, for the data lake. And they're actually, at this point in time, 2021, they're used to having to dig and fend for themselves and sometimes build their own little mini data architecture to get what they want done. And so for them, the minor inconvenience of not having everything spoon-fed to them with governance and modeling and consistency, like in the data warehouse, that's okay. That will change. That will change. We have to start knowing more about what they're doing and moving that needle closer to the point where they can just pick up and go and do data science. That's what the organization needs them to do. Yeah. But I mean, the reality is what it is right now. And we don't do that right now with our data lake, but the tools and the governance processes and so on are growing there.
It's a good point, because say you're an enterprise, say you have a dozen data scientists. When we keep it simple, they have a dozen data scientists and they're all trying to figure out for themselves how to navigate the relationships and the data that's in that data lake. And they're all meaning well, but they're probably not going to arrive at perfectly the same answers all of the time. So there's going to be some degradation and consistency there. And there's certainly a time inefficiency in making that happen. But the rub is the fact that anytime we try to remove noise or create simplicity, we by nature remove fidelity from that data. We remove some of the richness of that data to create more consistency, because data is just going to have some of that noise. And sometimes with data scientists, they really need that noise, and other times they don't. Other times they're not looking at that noise. That noise is just noise. Other times it's really meaningful. And if I'm building a platform to try to serve all of those constituencies, I don't know when they're going to need that or not. So I've got to try to give them an ability to flex into, do I need a faster, more homogenized view of the data, or do I need a richer, arguably richer, granular view that encompasses all of that noise without any pre-processing of that signal?
Well, I can tell you we're pushing hard on the latter right now. Because that's what the needs really of the organizations are, is more data. more data for data scientists who are used to the struggle, if you will,
Yeah.
of getting that data in motion. Now, for our data warehouses, from day one, we've had to know a lot about what they're going to use the data for. We've had to influence that, and we builders, I must say, we know a lot about the analytics of the organization and a lot about where the organization should go. Now, I'm not saying push that on the user community, but work with them. And we've always had to, work with them and lead them a little bit more than, what we're doing now with the data lake. So I've had to know what they need, how the data works. Obviously, the data modeling is, 10x in a warehouse versus a lake. But I encourage my clients, don't just start throwing things in the lake. You don't have to do the full data model, right, for it. But understand what's going in there. And what you find is that it's really not data from all over the place. It's in chaotic messes and all this. And yes, every record can be different. It's going to be schema on read. But there are patterns to the data that's taken on. And there might be little differences, like if you're reading sensor data, there might be little differences in the schema from record to record, but it's not going to be that much. And so we model what's going into our, Hadoop or cloud storage or wherever we have our lake or lakes. We model that, and we're waiting for a tool to do a great job, for this. But, we're doing our best with Excel, and we're doing our best with promotion of here's what it is. So we're trying to approach the rigor that we have in our data warehouse as best we can today in that data lake.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, and there's a corollary here. As data platform builders, we're focusing a lot of that, ingest of the data, prepping of the data, and then usage of that data. There's also a corollary of the people that are using that data. What do their outputs look like? Like on a data warehouse, they tend to also be more regimented, more consistent. On the data science side, I think our data scientists often struggle with a similar problem themselves of like, they've done these very detailed algorithms. They've identified new and interesting conclusions and tested hypotheses and stuff, but a business doesn't necessarily know what to do about that. Like, how do you circle that insight back into something from a business perspective that creates value in the end? I think there's signal loss in that as well. Like every idea that a data scientist has cannot necessarily be acted upon by the business.
Well, it's amazing that you brought that up. I wanted to bring this up as well, but my perspective was going to be that, what's hard is getting the organization to make bold moves on what comes out of that whole data science and commit to it. And that process, that wheel should be greased before the results come out. The business should understand, here's the data, here's what they're doing, here's how they're doing it, here's how they're going to test it, A/B modeling, what have you. And when this is all said and done, we're going to commit hard to it. Now, you can always back out of these decisions. So it's not usually, make or break the company types of decisions, but we want to warm up the enterprise to, hey, there's some insights coming here and we want you to use it. As a matter of fact, if you don't do that, a lot of times the scientists aren't motivated to go through that wall and get the deep insights that the business really could use. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's you kind of read my mind of where I wanted to kind of drive this conversation, because we focused a lot on like, some of the perspective of the data architect or the data modeler or the technologist building these platforms, but you do a lot of work in your business with that senior leadership side. And I've seen such a range in organizations today. Like it's 2021, but like there's a wide range of the ability for organizations to leverage the data that they have created or have access to or could be using, and just have it. Everything from defining key performance indicators to understanding how to seize new market opportunities or what have you. If you're a CEO or a senior leader and you're saying, I think I can relate to that statement of my organization isn't quite where we want to be with data, and with our ability to act on insights coming from data. At that level, what are some of the things that they could be doing or start to do even before they've created these data platforms? Like that's a big swing that takes time. We'll need to do that. How does the CEO start moving their organization in that kind of direction?
Yeah, well, when the CEO is behind projects, when behind a philosophy, behind the strategy of the company, that is certainly very, very, very helpful to getting that done, whatever it is. And so we want the CEO, we want executive leadership, period, to be behind our data projects. Now, we don't do, I said data project. We don't really want to do data projects. We want to build platforms that support business objectives, whether it's fraud detection, predictive maintenance, customer churn management, supply chain management. These are the things that we actually do. Mm-hmm. The data platforms that we build are there to support these initiatives. But we just want an understanding that there are artifacts that we're building out to support those initiatives that actually could be reused and are actually important in and of themselves. So we try to carry educational messages throughout the organization, whether it's chalk talks or consistency in our internal presentations, what have you. There's a lot of different internet sites that we, put things on, various messages and so on, that try to move the organization in a direction of caring about its data, understanding that data is very important to all these applications. It's not a drag along. It's a discipline in and of itself. And you need data experts working that discipline, or you're going to face a lot of challenges down the road. And so these are the messages that we try to get up to the C-level, and hopefully that it's embraced there.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to paraphrase because I want to play it back using some different words, because I hope I'm not overextending your point, but that is like if you want a CEO to become more, or if you're a CEO and you want to become more data driven as an organization, it comes back not to prioritizing data. It really comes back to prioritizing improving your business and recognizing that data and those capabilities are, components of achieving those business objectives. Like we can handle the build out of the data platform, but we have to have their support in connecting the importance of that data and those abilities through the data platforms that we create to align to that business direction and that business strategy that better be coming from that CEO's office or through that senior leadership team. Because I don't need the CEO to build a data warehouse. What I need is a CEO to recognize that data warehouse is going to be really important to achieving that business strategy.
Yeah, and when it comes time to think about how the value was created, that it wasn't all created at the tip of the spear with the application, but it's that underlying data platform that really should be what's creating the bulk of the value. And this is part of what's called becoming data driven. And many CEOs will say now they got the message that they want to be data driven, but that requires more than just saying it. That requires follow through on activity that improves your data maturity within the organization, improves your platforms, improves the use of the data, the analytics, how it all works together, and just the general mindset of the organization around, as you said, the importance of data.
Well, and there's real investments here. This isn't we should do this in our free time type of engagement here. Like you need to decide, is being data driven actually important? Because it means you don't get to open that new branch, or it means you may not be able to take on that other initiative that would use those dollars. And so there has to be a real awareness that A, investment's going to be necessary, and B, how do we then, on the flip side, determine whether or not that investment was worthwhile, or whether or not this investment should be paying off? It's our best, from an opportunity cost standpoint, it's the best thing that we could do with these limited funds that we will invest to it. How do you help senior leaders kind of validate or gauge the success from a cost benefit perspective of these kinds of significant investments in data capabilities?
Yeah, we do a lot of this. So You're right. I like how you put that about, we may not be able to build another branch or open another store or something if you're going to do this. Yes, it's building out the underlying foundation so that you're more secure going forward, so that when you go forward, you're not recreating the wheel with every new store opening or branch opening. You've done it before. You have processes, you have data, you have the data stored in a reasonable way so that it supports all of these things, right? And so you certainly don't show ROI by talking about the build of a data warehouse or the build of a lake or this or that, right? You show ROI in fraud detection. You show ROI in supply chain efficiencies. You show ROI in getting more customers, right? Marketing efforts and so on. But data supports that. As a matter of fact, the data foundation should be screaming out, hey, here's the next best action for you to take to achieve your business objectives, right? We should be building them in that way. And so there are different ways that different companies appreciate and accept, ROI projections and that sort of thing. We do all that. We're huge on justification. And sometimes that's all we do for companies is we get them moving in the right direction by justifying those moves, whether it's to build a lake or it's to do targeted marketing or do them with one another, whatever it is.
Yeah. And that notion of needing to be quantified in our outputs from those data platforms. Like, it's not okay to just ignore that benefit side just because data's not the whole reason. Like, data's not the whole reason you got that new customer, but it's part of that reason. And so the thing that I advocate a lot of the time is say, okay, we can debate the equation and then we can debate the variables. Start with the equation. Say, our data platform allowed us to identify new opportunities that were X% responsible for this improvement in the business. And let's come up, and it'll be more complicated than that, but let's come up with an equation that we can agree on, that if we had the data to give us a perfect analysis of our platform was exactly 23% of the reason of that dollar that we got from the new customer or what have you, we could perfectly quantify it. We're obviously not going to be able to do that. But if we can get to an equation where if we had that data, we could, then we can debate the ranges. So it was somewhere between $0 and $1. Let's narrow it in. Was it between 25 cents and 75 cents? Well, it's probably not 75 cents. It was 50 cents. Okay, fine. 25 cents to 50 cents. Now you can start to create a border range. If we agree on all the component pieces, we have to accept the outcomes from that. And now at least we have a quantified value appropriation of our data investment, and it gives us something to work with, because that can be refined. It's doing nothing can't be refined into something. Like, you have to start with some technique to be able to do that. Now, I talk a lot about doing those things. That's how I've kind of approached it. Do you do something different, or is that more or less the same type of approach you take with your clients?
I mean, it depends on the organization, and we do a lot of bottom line ROI. You do this. Oh yeah, by the way, it happens to use a great data platform. We're going to do it right so it can be used again. And by the way, I preach that doing it right doesn't take longer. It takes the knowledge and the leadership to do it right. Yeah. And I try to share that knowledge and grow that leadership in our organizations so that they do it right, so that it not only works for tomorrow, but it works down the line as well. Now, everything has its age off date, but we don't want to build something that the enterprise is going to question in a year or two. So anyway, we're going to build it right, but that all is sort of an aside. Okay. A lot of times the CEO, the C-level, whoever's funding it, VPs, what have you, they're focused on the bottom line ROI to the organization. And as things have gotten tighter in the economy over the past decade or so, we've seen this. There's been more clamor for this kind of ROI measurement around the things that we do in an enterprise, not down to the penny, not always looked at after the fact to see, did we hit that? And, like you say, how to allocate the value across the different components. but you win as a team. You win as a team that did the data, combined with the team that did the app, combined with the team that did the security, that this and that whole team can produce some ROI. Now, they all have a cost factor. The cost is relatively easy to come up with. Yeah. We price out these platforms all the time, and it's usually more than what an enterprise is expecting, but it is what it is. But as long as you can go above that, with the returns, it should be something that you do. So we got to look hard at the returns, and we can't do that in isolation. We have to get the business involved.
Yeah, I often make the joke. I'm like, it's incredibly unfortunate that we have such clear visibility into the costs of building these data platforms compared to how difficult it is to understand the value that they do create, and they do create real value. The other thing is I know you in your organization, you do a lot of benchmarking. You look at a lot of things on the industry side, and that's an important proxy as well. Like we know our estimates are estimates, but it's also very helpful to see industry wide. If we put $1 towards a data warehouse, we'll get $3 back or what have you. I think that's an important decision framework as well, because it adds credibility, I think, to the internal dialogue of, hey, we have a department who really wants to do this. Everybody's looking for money. They're going to try to swing the numbers in their favor. When we can get some industry level benchmarks or some generalized benchmarks, it helps that internal group that's trying to justify this. Because I imagine the people that are listening to this podcast are approaching it from many different vantage points. Some of them are the senior leaders authorizing funds and making those decisions on the trade-offs. Others are trying to stand up these kinds of programs and pitching for those resources. Others are consultants that are having a role in these efforts to get them done. Like, we're all over the place, but I think that there is a right way. There is truth behind some of this. And if we can expose that, hopefully our organization will be able to do the right things. And we believe that a lot of these right things involve building data platforms to support business strategy and the objectives of the organizations.
We definitely do. There's a few right ways. There's a few ways, I'll put it this way. There's probably an ideal way. I don't know that we always find that ideal way. I know that we find ways that work and don't get questioned down the road, that work, are interoperable with the environment, that people can get behind, that we create a support environment for these projects as they go into production and so on. So there's all that, but there's multiple ways that can work, but there are definitely a lot more ways that maybe they seem to work initially, but we don't want something that's going to get smoked out in 6 months to a year. We want something that's going to last in the enterprise. And today, with data lakes, it's a lot more involved than it used to be. People say, well, we're moving to the cloud. It's a lot easier now. Well, some things are, some things aren't. Because even though you're moving to the cloud, you don't have your own infrastructure in-house to deal with and so on. And sure, that was a pain. But now you have so many more components to an environment, a data catalog, for example, over the top, machine learning technologies, data engineering environments, data security has become, more prevalent in the things that we do. So it's a lot of work, but it has to be supported by a lot of knowledge. So each organization needs to have people that are staying on top of this industry for the organization.
Yeah, and you just got me thinking. I'm as big of an advocate of the cloud as you'll find, but there's also that challenge of, if we're involving public cloud, we have different stakeholders involved in the kind of core infrastructure operations of the computing resources that we have, resolving problems. I mean, the amount of challenges between an organization, their cloud provider, an application provider, trying to negotiate who's at fault, where is the breakdown, what is the challenge? It adds a dimension of complexity to everything from does it work or not. That's just the beginning. It's performance issues and cost and utilization issues. There may be some consistency because the public cloud is shared and leveraged by so many people. There's great tools and ability to analyze, but sometimes things slow down and you're like, where do we even begin? Which of the 20 departments that are involved in our cloud architecture do I need to talk with to resolve something? Yeah,
you got to stay on top of that. You can't just turn it all over to the cloud provider. the hyperscaler, they're looking out for you to some degree, but you really got to be on top of that. And like you say, there's still a lot of components that are involved. And thankfully, the cloud came along when it did, or maybe that's just how evolution works, because there's so much more now that's going to take up our minds as we go forward into machine learning.
Yeah, well, it's enabled so many new things, but it's added new complexities. And at a high level, and because you've been doing this a long time, are there fundamentally new differences today in the things that we're caring about, or are there just different details, but the themes haven't changed? Like, how much has really changed in data-driven organizations and how your clients go about solving it? Now, granted, the technologies have changed, but is it a fundamentally different problem today than what we dealt with, say, 20 years ago?
I mean, I think we're thinking harder about automation. Okay, so we're starting to understand that the computer and the infrastructure and all that can take up a lot more than what it used to, and we're really believing it now, and we're doing it. And so this is a factor, a dimension of everything that we think about within an organization today, especially as we move into machine learning algorithms. So I think we're going to see that idea more and more. So less of a human people intensive, project being acceptable to the organization to, well, let's rethink this. What can artificial intelligence do for us? Maybe in the past, we did BI. We produced reports and somebody looked at them maybe, and somebody did something about them maybe. Or maybe that can all be automated. We'll skip the reports part and move the actions from the data right into our business processes. So I think organizations are thinking more about that. And clearly, as time goes on, they have a more well-developed data architecture. Now, it may be just slightly more developed, but they have more data, at least, that's under management. And you might think, well, given enough time that they'll get it all organized. That just hasn't happened so much. Organizations are focused on the next big thing. And so remediation is something that we end up having to do to get to that next thing that the organization wants to achieve. It makes sense for a business initiative. Just to do it, well, you better be showing some reduced TCO on doing something like that. Now, that's interesting, and that does happen occasionally. But mostly organizations have a lot of different artifacts in their data architecture. They're not mature in a sense of, where they could be, where there are some leading organizations that are mature. They're few and far between. They're actually leading their fields respectively because they do have their data act together, and they are able to make decisions a lot quicker and undergirded with a lot of great data. That's
awesome. So, William, I am sad to see we are out of time, and this has just flown by for me. I looked out at the recording time and look, oh no, we're already over 40 minutes. So we got to wrap it up. But yeah, it's been awesome talking with you. I think this is very relatable and got into enough depth that I think it's helpful for our kind of entire audience. So I hope everyone else has enjoyed this as well. So thank you so much for being on the show today. I think it was great.
Thank you, Anthony. It was a lot of fun.
And thank you for watching or listening today. In the show notes, you'll find useful links and more information about today's topic. Follow Data Leadership Lessons on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Check out my book at dataleadershipbook.com and use promo code ALGMANDL at the Dataversity Training Center for 20% off your first purchase. Stay safe during these unusual times and go make an impact.